Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm not Lee White, but I am Will Terry, and all three of us are professional illustrators. We've all worked for all the major publishers in the business. Together, we published somewhere around 75 children's books, and we've all taught illustration at university art schools.
Yep. Each week we talk about illustration stuff. That's what we do. And this particular week we're doing an interview with Shawn Crystal, who's a comic artist, veteran comic artist, and he's also my co-teacher for the upcoming Graphic Novel Pro course that we're running in May. So we wanted to bring him on here, talk to him about the industry of comics, where it's at, where it's going, how to break into it, where it's been. And we just had a great conversation with him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to waste anybody's time, but really quick, just to give you context of who Shawn is. He's worked for Marvel. He's worked for DC. He currently does illustrations for Marvel Snap, which is a huge Marvel trading card game that's only done online or just digital, I guess. He also runs inkpulp.tv, which is a podcast. There's comics courses that you can take on there. And so that's kind of like his central hub for everything that he's doing, inkpulp.tv. So you can check him out on Instagram. You can check him out on YouTube. I've been on his podcast a couple times as well. And the moment, like, that's how we met. I don't know how he got my name or how I ended up on that podcast, but I was just so impressed with them. And I was like, I got to do something with this guy. And so I reached out to him. I was like, should we, it's like, hey, are you into me? Cause I'm kind of into you. Like, do you want to do Graphic Novel Pro with me? I have this idea for a comics course. And he was like, heck yeah, sign me up. And so we've been working on this for the last year, like figuring out the outline. What do we want to go over? What do we want to do? And we've started recording those classes. Anyways, without further ado, Shawn Crystal. Okay, so we have Shawn Crystal here. He's a comics industry veteran, and I want to just jump into the conversation, kind of not bury the headline here, but in 2025, how's the comic industry changing? And I just want you to have a larger conversation about, like, if you're wanting to get into comics and into this industry moving forward, it's not the same game it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So what do you think?
All. It's changing very fast and, in my opinion, in very healthy ways. So let's rewind. When I wanted to get into comics, I was young and I wanted to write and draw my own books. Like, that was always my goal. I was a fan of the superhero stuff, but I was also a fan of the indie stuff. Now, at that time, there was no internet because I'm old.
What year are we talking about?
We're talking about 1988, when I had kind of made the decision, this is what I want to do. So from 88 up until, I'd say, 2008, this is probably the case. But there was no internet at this time. And so the idea of self-publishing your own books was extremely overwhelming. You needed money. You needed to know, like, you needed publishers. And then American publishers are so expensive, and most comics were being published in Quebec at the time. So you needed to know how to get in touch with them and how to do a bunch of things. And there was no resources unless you knew someone to really give you this info.
Well, just to be clear here, when you say publisher in this context, it's a printer, like a
printer. I'm sorry. Printer, not publisher. Printer. Yes. The printer was Quebecor in Quebec.
Right.
So there were some people, like the creators of the Ninja Turtles and David Lapham with Straight Bullets and Jaime and Jeff Smith. Yeah, like, they all found a way to make it work. But Jeff Smith's, like, the first Bone books were at Image.
First. They was cartoon books. It was his own.
Yes.
And
then they went to Image. Yeah. So there were people that had found a way, but they're few and far between. And these are people whose skill set was well beyond what I understood.
Mhm.
So the path to me, because the books I was excited about and the creators I was really excited by were that were doing their own thing, they became a name at Marvel and DC Comics. Frank Miller became a name
Mhm.
at Marvel and then DC, and Mike Mignola, the
Mhm.
same thing. And the Image guys all broke off, but that was because they became a name and they went and started Image. So it seemed to me at the time that the path to create our own comics was that build a name up at a popular publisher, and then you'll have another indie publisher feel like publishing your book isn't like a suicidal risk mission
Right.
for them financially.
Right. Because
So that was
nobody gets their own book at Marvel or DC. Like
right,
they have their cast of characters that they built up over years, which
right.
they own. Essentially, if you did your own book at Marvel or DC, you wouldn't own it. You
Yeah,
just
exactly.
right.
Exactly. And you'd be held to their limitations of
Mhm.
what they deem acceptable for their audience and that
Mhm.
character. Now, I will say they used to be a lot more flexible in that arena than they are now, because they didn't have corporate entities owning them and having a vested interest in their properties. So yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But so that seemed like the path, and it started to change in the early 2000s. You had some indie publishers come in with some backers. People were starting to take notice in comics from other media and seeing a potential in this for movies. So money started coming a little bit, but I was exploring all avenues I could, trying to break in. I eventually broke in at Marvel and was exclusive with Marvel Comics for a few years, and then went to DC, and then kind of bounced back and forth. And my goal was to be able to go and do my own thing. And it just surviving, just making enough money to survive meant working 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days.
Wow.
Mhm.
So in that, where and that's just to get by. Like it's not like I'm able to save much in that way. So
Mhm.
the goal of me doing my own thing was just getting farther and farther away from me. So I had to make a shift. And come the internet comes into play now, and you've got platforms that you can crowdfund. You've got, I mean, you don't even need to print a book. You can just do a web comic, put it on
Right.
Instagram for free. So, people ask about breaking in and saying, I want to be a pro. And I think now it's more like, well, then just be a pro. Like, think of yourself as a professional,
Mhm.
put yourself on a schedule, and do a comic strip on Instagram and hold yourself to your deadlines. And if you maintain that and you can act professionally with it and it's good, you'll grow your audience and you're a pro. Now, if you want to work for Marvel and DC, that's also changed so much too. When I was coming up, you'd go to conventions. Conventions weren't these big pop culture events like they are now. Like
Mhm.
I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 1996, 95,
Mm.
and it was tiny.
Yeah.
It was this tiny little
It's more like a
show.
trade show type of
Yeah,
thing, like
it
very
was.
much industry only type of people, like,
Yeah.
you know.
That's all. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, there was no fans like from the outside really. A few. But they had an industry day the day before the show, which was like just for people in the industry and people wanting to break in the industry. And they had portfolio lines. Like my first San Diego Comic-Con, this is crazy to think about. You had a DC table, you had a Marvel table, I remember Dark Horse, and a few other publishers with editors sitting there, and you just waited in line to get your portfolio reviewed. You got up to the front of one line, then you went to the back of the other line, and you'd spend all day like doing that, and you'd
Mhm.
get like, two, maybe three in a day, and you'd be good.
Mhm.
And
Two
so
or three
that's
what? You,
reviews.
oh,
Like you'd get in
reviews.
front of
Okay.
2 or 3 editors. So like DC would have 2 editors, so you could wait in line and see one, then jump into another line at Marvel, wait in line and see that, and then jump back in the DC line and see the other editor. And that's all you did. You spent the day standing in line. You met a lot of people wanting to break in. You had a lot of interesting talks. And
the point of
that's
that would be that they'd be like, hey, we found one,
right.
let's continue this conversation. Here's my card.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, that card. It was all about the card. If you got a card, it didn't mean you were getting work. It meant you were on to the next level. Like getting a card meant I'm interested in you. I want to see how you develop. So I'm going to give you like fake assignments to see how you're doing and give you areas to improve upon. And then you do that. So there was a lot of work involved just to get work, but this is how you did it. And then at that point you could mail samples, this is another. So one, you do the cons and then you get a card, and now if you're, you collect the cards and you get like a stock of editors who are keeping an eye on you. You're doing sample pages and you're spending a day at Kinko's making Xeroxes of them. I remember I made these little labels with like my name and number on them and a logo, and I put them on each page and Xeroxed them, and they made these little packets, and you put them in the mail and you hope they get there.
Yeah.
And then if you're lucky, you hear back, and you just would play this game for years.
In a way that almost seems so much easier, as archaic as it sounds. Like to just physically go meet a person face to face. They get to see immediately what your personality is like. Are you presentable? Can you carry a conversation? You get immediate feedback on your work. And I kind of like miss that aspect of it.
I miss it too. It was because one important thing it did, I think one of the most important things that process did was it made you work for it. So that it was like, if you want this, you're going to have to work for it. It's not just given to you, because it's not the type of job you should get and then flake on, because then your reputation's ruined. So if you're not turning in the samples regularly, they're not going to take you very seriously. So, and now it's like, there's this expectation of like, I should just forward you my Instagram and you hire me. And if I have to do anything beyond that, then that's not fair.
Right.
And and I think that also, like, I'm always talking about craft. If you know me and my work and my social media, I think that's where the craft suffers too, because what I had to do and what like my generation had to do is you had to constantly improve on your skills. And getting back to the point, that's how you broke in. And I remember once the movies became a thing, like Iron Man came out, and we've had this conversation a lot with my friends. When did the shift happen at San Diego Comic-Con? And I'm pretty sure we've all kind of landed on the idea it was Twilight. When the Twilight movies hit, the marketing team from those movies, or I guess the first one, thought it would be smart to send the talent, the actors, the director, to San Diego Comic-Con to have a panel. And I remember I got there and there was an entire like hotel wrapped in an ad for Twilight. We had never seen anything like that before.
Like, this isn't a comic.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. But what it did was it made that movie launch huge. So then all of LA was like, all right, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And so then that little con became massive, to the point where it got to a point where it was undoable. Just financially, it was insane. Like, you used to be able to get a nice hotel room very affordably. And then now just getting a room was an issue. And then the price was a whole nother issue. And the crowds navigating that. So what happened was the publishers, at some point in the mid 2000s, I want to say early 2000s, publishers started to decide to stop showing there. Like, Marvel didn't set up for a few years at San Diego Comic-Con before the Marvel movies. And so now your chance to get in front of editors was much more difficult.
Right. But your chance to get a Funko Pop toy was a lot higher.
And exclusive, a San Diego exclusive. I mean, and that's when people started camping out for stuff. And
then the cosplay aspect of it, which is
that
huge.
came in. Yeah, that came in too.
I would say you know, a lot of comic artists, and I've obviously being in that world, there's a lot of complaints like, oh, Comic Cons aren't what they used to be. And, you know, and they really, you know, they've drifted away from what comics are. But, you know, looking at it through just a lens of creativity, these still are like creative festivals where
Absolutely.
people who put all this time and energy into costuming come and get to show off their stuff.
Yeah.
People who are just straight up fans of all these different fandoms go to like meet with other people who are fans, whether it's trading cards or toys, or, you know, even there's a lot of original art sales that go on at Comic-Con as well. I've seen.
This is I like what you just said, and I agree with you. The issue for the comic book creator is they've become huge, and they attract the general public now where they never did before. And you're right, it's full of creativity. I mean, the cosplay alone, the creativity going into some of those costumes is incredible.
They rival, some of these costumes rival like movie props. Like
absolutely.
I'm sure I've heard stories of people who are cosplayers who get jobs as like on movie sets. Like, okay, I'm doing this now as a full-time gig.
And that's another thing. They've become sort of a landscape for people getting jobs in all sorts of media now. Because you've got the cosplayers, but then you've got the videographers who are teaming up with the cosplayers, making these little like mini movies at the show of people in costume. And those look incredible. So those people are getting scooped up. So there's all kinds of great stuff happening there. I'd say the issue that I think most comic creators have, I don't want to speak for everyone, but the issue I have and that I've talked to others about is as these conventions grew and the corporations came in and took over, they started treating the comic book talent like secondhand citizens. Because you might have like at New York Comic Con, like 200,000 people come through, but a lot of those people aren't comic book fans, and they don't even know that comic book art is like a thing. So it's not like your sales are going up, and it's not the only thing that's going up is your cost of doing the show. Now they used to give you free tables because you were a pro. Now they're charging you $500 for a table. And then they have, you know, they used to, it used to feel like we helped build this, and now it's like we don't need you. And
which ironically, like every film that comes out that's comic related, it's based on a comic that was written and drawn by a team of, you know, 5 people or whatever, or 2 people 20 years ago. And Holly was just like, we need more ideas. Well, it's what they do in the comics. Of course, I don't want to belittle Hollywood's contribution to it, because they amplify it and they do some really good stuff too. But you wouldn't have anything if you don't have the characters, the comic artists and the comic writers came up with.
Exactly. So I mean, from what I think is like, if these corporate conventions would lift the talent up a bit more, treat them a little better, and put the spotlight on them a little bit, you might have more people interested in going around and looking at what they're doing and having conversations and learning about the medium and what's being done. And that's just going to lift up comic book sales from small publishers to large publishers. But I like the fact that I could take my kids to the first wave of Marvel movies growing up, and they lost their minds seeing that stuff. Like that was a lot of fun for me. I
lost my mind too.
Yeah, I did too. But you know,
I remember sitting in Endgame. You know, we just watched 10 years, 22 movies or whatever, and I came out of Endgame like practically crying. I was just like, I felt like it was the weirdest thing, because I felt like I had really participated in something unique that might not ever happen again. You know, that huge $1 billion payoff.
And you were right,
storytelling wise. And I was just like, this was incredible. I can't believe
it was.
I can't believe I felt like I was sitting in the theater in 1977 Star Wars. Like,
no doubt. It was, I agree with you 100%. And they did an amazing job. They really did. Like, I remember saying, like, Hollywood's making better stuff with the Marvel universe than Marvel publishing by far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was nice to have that. And I just wish that they would like that popularity, that the corporate conventions would take us with them on the journey a little more, instead of like pushing us to the side and be like, we'll give you a table, give us some money.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, you
So
can have a green room with a few Cokes, but it's not the same green room as the other people.
right. Right.
It's like the A-list actors.
Right.
So you were gonna ask.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So here we are, 2025. What does a young 20-year-old Shawn, or a young 20-year-old Will Terry, what do they do to break into the comics industry? Like, what is it that's gonna get them, making comics for a living?
My first question, when someone asks me that, I respond with a question. I ask, what do you want to do? Because I think about me. I wanted to write and draw my own stuff. And that's not to say I wasn't excited about drawing Batman. I was, drawing Scarlet Witch. Like I was excited to draw that stuff. But that wasn't my primary goal. So if a young me came up to me and be like, okay, well, just go do your thing, because you can. Like now you can. And you have means and ways of doing it. And because of that, publishing is hurting in terms of like the mainstream publishers. Their sales are they're going down, they go up, they go down, but they're steadily going down. And the price is going up and up and up. It's just insane what a floppy costs nowadays. It's crazy.
For context, there, it's when I started collecting comics as a teenager, I could get 5 comics at the comic shop and be out, under $10.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I first started, like Spider-Man was 75 cents.
Yeah. And now if I go to the comic shop and I pick up 5 books, I'm close to $30, or more.
That's crazy. And the bigger issue there is, let's say there's a arc of Spider-Man you're really excited to read. It's going to be 5 issues long. So those 5 issues could cost you $30. But if you can just wait until those issues are done and they put out the collected version trade paperback for $20, you're going to get it cheaper. So the whole business model is kind of a mess.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say, so what's happening now, what I'm really excited about now, is I see these young creators coming in. Like, flash back to what I said at the beginning, you had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles starting to come out, Stray Bullets coming out, Love and Rockets is coming out. This really incredible creative wave of black and white comics. And then that sort of quiets down for a while. And now it's coming back, and it's going to be louder and better than ever, I think, because of the means for putting it out. And so I have dedicated like the whole entire Ink Pulp platform to embracing that community and trying to like use whatever cachet I have, Mateo has, and Jim has, to plow a path so that more people can just come in and do their thing. Just because, I mean, we've all, Jim, Mateo, and I have had 3 very different experiences in the comics market. Mateo is a rock star. Yeah. I mean, he's like, I was talking about struggling to make a living, unless you're like, there's a handful like of people, I'd say maybe 5 to 10 at most, that reach a level of popularity as an artist where they're making really good money because of royalties, because the original art sales are worth more. They're on top tier books and all that stuff. That's rare. Mateo has reached that sphere. Yet he's writing and drawing his own book now. And then there's me. I was like the middle class at Marvel and DC, and I always wanted to do my own thing. Now I can. And so I'm shifting gears, because I like I said, I just couldn't make a comfortable living that way. And I was losing sight of why I was doing this. And it became a job. And I didn't get into art to have a job. Like, I mean, yes, it's a job, but what makes it better than a desk job? I don't want to turn what I do into a desk job.
Right.
Mhm.
And then there's Jim, who has such a unique and creative voice and style. It was always difficult for him to fit in at a more mainstream publisher, yet he's done amazing things. And Jim has kind of taught me so much because he's always had to forge his own path
Mm-hmm.
in this. And so I think with the three of us, it's a real good mix of creators and ideas
Yeah.
and perspectives
Yeah.
that can really help the younger generation
And
move forward in the creative
you
stuff.
had Eric Canetti
Yeah, and Eric too.
joining you guys as well for a while there. You know,
Yeah.
he kind of comes and goes, but he's another, I feel like one of these guys who really bridges the gap between creator owned projects and mainstream comics.
Yeah.
Because if I look at his career, you know, my introduction to him was an Image comic, which is about as indie. It was
Yeah.
Cybernary or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I first started seeing it, and this was years and years and years ago. And I was like, this guy's got a really cool style, really interesting. And then pretty soon he's like doing an Iron Man comic, and then
Right.
he'll go back and do another indie thing, and then he'll go and do some sort of thing for Marvel, and then you know, and so yeah, I look at the 3 or 4 the people that you've surrounded yourself with, and they are like these people who think outside of the box and
Yeah,
work
that's very true.
super creatively and come to the whole world of comics with such professionalism balanced with massive amounts of imagination and skill and everything. So yeah, really cool. So I like that question. Like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say the answer is, I want to draw Batman. Like I
Okay.
want to be the top Batman artist at some point.
Okay.
So what's the answer there?
So, okay, I have a good example of this. So someone came up to me at New York Comic Con last year, just this past year.
Mhm.
An artist, she's in animation. Her name's Camille. And this is funny. My whole history in comics, you had like people trying to break out of comics to go to animation because the pay was stable.
Mhm.
You had good insurance from the union. You had union benefit. Like it was like the grind of comics just kind of sucked the life out of so many people that, you know, they're like, animation is the promised land.
Mhm.
Now that I guess AI and economy is like, the animation industry is shrinking.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
they're laying off people. So she had been laid off, and she had come to me telling me like, I work in animation, but I want to get into comics. I just had never heard that. I was like, wait a minute, that's backwards. Like,
Yeah.
okay. And then she explained to me, I was like, okay, great. So I was like, let me see your work. Because she said she wanted to do covers for DC. And I opened up her, she had printed a little, looked like a mini comic, but it was a portfolio, beautifully printed, all color work.
Yeah.
She did visual development and environmental development and animation. She was amazing. So I was looking at it, I was like, you can be working right now if you want to be working. I was like, the work is there. You just need to get in front of an editor. And then I said, I don't know how to do that at this show, because again, at cons, you don't have editors at the booth. Like, you want to go
Mhm.
talk to a DC editor, they're not at the booth. I was like, but you know, I have a editor I've worked with my entire career at DC. I was like, let me just send her some samples after the con.
Mhm.
And so Camille emailed me stuff. I emailed it. She got hired right away. Like, that was a no-brainer. And
Mhm.
that's a rare thing to happen. So the first thing, if they're saying I want to be a Batman artist, the first thing I'll always ask is, can I see your work?
Mhm.
Because that's going to tell me so much more. Like,
Mhm.
if you want to draw Batman and your work is really rough, let's talk about what you can do to improve, to get to a point where you're ready to be in front of an editor.
Mhm.
And if the work is ready, well, then if I can help, I'll help.
Mhm.
But if it's close to being ready, I'll be like, look, I'm just going to be, I'm honest. I'm always honest and upfront. I'm like, you're close. You can work on this, this, and this, and you might be able to get hired. There's no, even if you're great, there's no guarantee you'll get hired. Like, when I sent Camille stuff, I was like, I think she could get hired.
Mhm.
And luckily she did, but they might have said, no, I don't have a place for her. So if they're that close, then I have an honest discussion. I'll be like, okay, do you know what you're in for? If you pursue this, like, do you know what this lifestyle is like? Because I want to make sure like you're in for this, for what it is, not what you see on Instagram, the glamour of it all. If it even is looking glamorous, I want you to know. And it's exciting to work on Batman. I'm not gonna lie, that's a exciting thing to do. So it's like, okay, you got to work on your social media presence, because most editors are, from what I understand, and I don't know this to be fact, but their social media seems to be where a lot of people are getting recruited from. And I've seen it happen a lot, where like someone gets picked off of social media to go draw a book, and there's a lot of problem in that, because what you see on social media tends to be pinups, tends to be like,
Right.
your best foot, and it's rarely panel to panel storytelling. Because if you're doing that, then you're generally like probably wanting to you're already on your path to doing your own thing. So if you're just drawing glamour shots of like Nightwing and Batgirl, well, then if you get hired for interiors, and I know of a few examples of this where they picked someone off the social media and gave them like a big job, like a launch, a new title. And as they start working, they're realizing they have no idea how to do this. So then they're calling in people to help, and it gets messy. And that's where I feel like the craft suffers from that stuff.
I think of like Chris Samney, right? Who's doing the Batman and Robin book,
yeah,
year
Chris
one.
Is great. Yeah.
And my understanding is like DC has Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and they're like they're up there with like Mickey Mouse and like Pikachu as far as worldwide recognition of a character. So what I've noticed is they're gonna, for many years there was like 2 Batman books, Detective Comics and Batman. And now there's 20 Batman books. There's like Family Batman, there's Batman and Catwoman, there's all these different things. So they kind of like, and same with Wonder Woman and Superman, there's multiple books there. So, it makes sense business wise. Like if everybody loves these characters and they're not buying Green Lantern, well, let's do 2 Batman books instead of a Batman book and a Green Lantern, and we'll sell more books. Right. But that also means you've got to find these people who know what they're doing and who can stick with the schedule and can put the book out. But it also means there's a lot of people in line who want to draw Batman, right? And so I don't know, and maybe you have a better answer to this, but like it's almost like you reward somebody with drawing Batman instead of giving someone a go at drawing Batman. Like
absolutely.
Like
you're absolutely right.
And to bring it back to Chris, here's a guy who's proven I know how to draw comics. I can do comics backwards and forwards, upside down. And so then he starts doing Battober in like this really cool, unique style. And he like essentially took the kind of the Inktober approach to doing a 30-day art challenge, but just did Batman drawings. And that's when I think that's what got him this Batman book, this really high profile Batman and Robin year one type of book. Because they saw, oh, this guy has vision, this guy has work ethic. He's the one to launch this thing.
Yeah. I mean, probably so. When I broke in, you didn't start on Batman. I mean, you had to earn Batman. Like very few people got the shot at it, and you were lucky to get in on it. But what they did have, Marvel and DC both had anthologies. They were floppies with 3 short stories that were 8 to 10 pages each. And this was like the training ground for the new people. And they had art directors. Like at Marvel, you had Archie Goodwin, and at DC, I believe you had Joe Kubert. And their job, other than drawing comics, was to edit and kind of educate the new talent as they worked on these books. And then you graduated from that onto like a low tier book, and you work your way up. And it was a good system because it forced you to learn how to be better. And now you're right. It's just like, oh, you have 100,000 followers and I like what I'm seeing. Here's Batman. And then it's a mess. So yeah, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But also, the rates, we haven't even talked about that. I was talking about when I was working for Marvel and I was working for DC, I had a decent rate at the time. And I was still struggling to get by, but I'm also a dad and it's not just me. I'm not a young 20-year-old. The rates went down dramatically.
How does that make sense?
It makes no sense. So
Help
the
it make sense
starting
for me,
rate
Shawn.
now, it makes no sense, Jake. It's awful. I'm telling you, it's awful. Well, the starting rates now are less than my starting rate when I first started working for DC in 1999.
That's funny because we always talk about how illustration rates, the worst part of it is that it stayed the same for the last 100 years, but you're saying it's gone down.
It's gone down.
Wow.
And by a lot. Like and it's not just pencilers, it's inkers, it's writers. I remember Jimmy Palmiotti posted, he got a copy of like a rate they were offering a new writer, and then he had a letter of the rate they offered him for his first writing job, and that was like 10-15 years prior, and that was higher than what they were offering this new writer.
Wow. Is it just supply and demand? There's just so many people wanting the work that they can just afford to spend less?
I don't think that's it. I think there's the Marvel and DC are struggling to survive as a publisher. Their sales are not great. Their books are so expensive. They're expensive to make, and they're not making the money as a company that they need to. So I think all of they're always trying to, like, they're stuck in this mentality. And like in the 90s, you had this boom of comics selling, and it was built on a speculator market. We could do a whole episode on that. But so they found ways to capitalize on people buying like X-Men #1. Well, we'll offer it in a gold cover. We'll offer it in a foil cover. We'll offer it in a normal cover. And someone going to buy a copy of a book is now buying 3 copies of that book. So that worked for them short term, but ultimately caused a massive collapse in the industry. But they're so desperate now. I see them trying to do that again because I think COVID brought back a bit of that collector mentality and that collector market.
Not just in comics, but trading cards.
Yeah, trading cards. I know that one went big too.
Yeah, everything sort of has this like this collectability about it now. And you've seen a rise of I think the real winners in that are the graders. So you can, I don't know if you know this, Will, but there's if you have a comic, how do you know it's really like in the right perfect condition that you say it's in? So you take it to these graders, and they'll go in and they'll make sure they'll see, does it have a bent corner? Does it have a wrinkle here? You know, they'll just look at all these things. Is the print aligned just right? Is the staples in the good spot? All that stuff. And they'll give it a grading 1 through 10. And then they'll seal it in what they call slab it, right? So they'll seal in these plastic containers that you literally have to like get a chainsaw to open those things up if you want to access the comic, right? And now you've got a slabbed comic which you can't read. You can only look at the cover, right? And it says on it, 8, 9, 10 or whatever, and then you can sell that comic for, if you get a 10 on your grading, you could 10x the value of that comic.
Yeah,
right.
Easily.
Yeah. The same thing they do with like Pokemon cards and baseball cards and stuff like that too. So,
and one of the markets that's emerged from that. So I have a friend his hobby is collecting comics, and he's figured out how to restore old comics. Like he has a steam press. He knows like how to like bring the dies on a cover back together. Like he's amazing at it. But his hobby makes him more money than me working all year. And it's like he just like he knows what he's doing. He'll go to a comic convention with me, and he'll drop like 5,000 on comic books. And then a month later, he'll be like, yeah, all in all, I think I made 70 grand off that.
Of the 5,000 investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing. So there's that whole market. But I did want to get back to Will's question. The big problem comics has now, and the reason this is all happening, is it's not just that sales are down, the readership's not growing. So Marvel and DC, I can't say they haven't tried. I don't think they've tried in smart ways to bring in new readers. And because of that, you've got this audience that's aging and shrinking, and you're not bringing in new readers. So now the people you're selling to, that pool is just shrinking. And it's also a direct market system, which I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but basically all of the comic book stores, like to get floppies, are all going through primarily one distributor, and that's Diamond. And everything is based on a speculative pre-order system. So that alone is an issue, because then you got to get real estate in the monthly catalog to get people's eyes on what you're trying to sell, and then the stores will order some copies based on their guess of how well it'll sell in their shop. So the market is just in a really tough place right now, and those two publishers are struggling, and that readership is growing. But the problem that's going on there is the tunnel vision, because if you say the comic book market, it doesn't mean one thing. If you say, if you say the direct market, it means one thing. But if you say all comic books, well, that means you got to include web comics, you got to include book sales, manga, graphic novels, stuff like what Jake does. And if you do that, well, the direct market is this tiny little sliver of the entire market. So it says to a creator like me, is there's an audience out there for everything that's being done.
Right.
It's just not in superheroes.
I think, which is why we were doing the Graphic Novel Pro course, is because, and for those of you who listen to the show, you've heard me talk about Graphic Novel Pro that's coming down the line here, and enrollment is currently active. It closes May 1st, but the teacher that I teamed up with to teach it is Shawn right here. and the reason for that is because he's had this history with the direct market and with more traditional comic stuff, but he understands comics. He understands the art form of it, and he understands that world, and I think with what you're doing with Ink Pulp, what we're doing with SVSLEARN, is we want to empower creative people who want to tell visual stories with all the ability, the skill, but also just like the industry understanding and know-how, so that they can actually do something with it, right? Wouldn't you agree, Will? Like the whole purpose for SVS is empowering, like I said, empowering creative people to be able to make a living at doing something with their art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's exactly it. I've said it many, many times. I could take my 10, 15-year struggle of trying to get a career going in this, and I can take what I've learned from that and help someone shrink that down to like 5 years. Then I want to do that. And that's what got me into teaching. That's what got me, with my kids, I always had that approach, because, like I remember my daughter being like, I don't want to, I don't want it to be easy because of what you've done. I was like, this is an advantage you have. Take it.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason for you to have to suffer. It's never going to be easy. Like the opportunity can be in front of you. What you do with that opportunity is up to you.
Right. And I feel like some of you listening might be like, well, I wish I was born in the 70s, so that by the time I was ready to go into comics, I could just go meet an editor at San Diego Comic-Con and break in really easy that way. And, there was still competition at that point. It was just a smaller pool, but it was still, they still had to like, am I going to choose this guy or this guy? And I think today, you now have access to all the knowledge and the know-how, but the competition lies in what are you going to do with that knowledge and know-how that sets you apart from the 10 other people, that are as good as you. What are they doing? And so, I think like what you're saying, I said, if someone wants to draw Batman, what do they do? You answered that question. But if someone wants to just go publish, like do an indie published comic, what's your advice there? What do you do there?
All right, let me just back up real quick because I want to touch on that Batman thing one more time. I would say honestly, there's an argument to be made for you're going to have more success getting that Batman book by going doing your own book that's in the vein of Batman than just trying to bang on doors. I mean, like if you look at Daniel Warren Johnson, he started doing creator-owned comics that got the eye of what other people like DC and Marvel are doing. So I think you could make that argument. So if someone comes to me and says, I want to do my own books, I'm like, great. Like this is where everything's going right now. This is the future. This is the way to go. So there's so many avenues. I talk about Instagram, like just do a strip, put it on Instagram, do it regularly, build a following and grow, and then do something else now that you've got that community and that audience behind you. That's one way. If you want to do printed copies, we have crowdfunding. So use your platforms on social media and on the internet to like, I think the best advice you can give is be consistent, be professional, and grow an audience. And wherever you do, if you've really connected with them and you've built this community, they're going to move with you and support you as long as you're giving to them and supporting them. And then I think you can have a very healthy, like business, which is something I never thought of when I was working for Marvel and DC. I remember like towards like the end of me like hunting down freelance work, I was like, I've been in this for like 15 years and I've got really nothing to show for it. I was like, I haven't done anything for my business. I've only done stuff for their business. And so when they don't need me anymore, then what am I left with? And so I talk about that. I talk about building your business, building your audience, building your communities, crowdfunding to publish work, web comics, which are free and easy to get out there. Hustle, go to conventions, bark your wares out there, do what you got to do. And I have a few young indie creators I've met over the past few years, like Madi Keen, who we just had on the podcast. It's not out yet, but he's been on the live show. But Madi is like, I always tell him, like, you're the future. Like, I look at what you're doing, and I think if everyone is coming into this with the mindset of what you're doing, we're going to have the most creatively interesting like world in comics that I've ever seen in America. So
that's cool.
How do you combat like a lot of our students, when I feel like when I talk about self-publishing, because I love doing my own thing, but I feel like almost every one of us was programmed to get a job. And so it's such a foreign idea to say, look, your route to drawing Batman is actually probably better if you're working on your own stuff and you're putting your passion in there and your hard work. But how do you combat that and get them to see that vision?
I think that vision, that idea you had, that like you have to get a job, I think that's our generation. Because this younger generation opens up Instagram and they see people making a living on Instagram doing whatever it is. It's selling used comic books. It's selling Pokemon cards or whatever it is. So I think they're shown from an early age that if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, the world is your oyster. Maybe it's an unfair representation. It makes it look too easy, but I think they're coming at it with that mindset. But it's a good question because I can't say that as a blanket statement, but I know I was always kind of drilled into my head that I need a job. Like I remember saying to my parents I wanted to do comics, and when I was going to college, I was like, I want to study this. There was nowhere to study it. And they're like, well, what are you going to do to make a living? Was their question. I'm like, what do you mean? I want to do comics. They're like, but that's freelance. Like, how are you going to have insurance? So like, it put this bad idea in my head that like, oh, you can't work for yourself.
Right.
So I think like if you can somehow take the person who's like, I need a job, and point out, well, what does owning a business look like to you? Then I think it can shift their mentality. Like if you want to be like an employee, and some people just are like, I just want to draw Batman. Like that's all I want to do. Okay, great. I'll like, here's the way to go do that. Good luck. But even doing that, you're going to be better served if you act as a business, not an employee, because no matter what happens, I mean, anything can happen. DC could be like, we're done. You're next. And then you've got nothing. Or you could hurt your hand. Or in my position where I was working 7 days a week and struggling to get by, if I had understood, hey, Shawn, create some passive income, so while you're working, you're also making money, it would have made things much easier on me. So I just think it's really important to be business-minded now. I think it's the world we're living in now. It's a different world. So that's my combat to the idea of like, well, I need a job.
And honestly, I'm going to get a little out there, but if you take a step back and look at humanity from the time we were like making stone tools to now, working for someone else really only is something that's been happening for the last couple of 100 years. Up until then, if you wanted to feed yourself and raise a family, you tilled the ground, and then you harvested the vegetables and you went to market and you sold them, right? Or you went out and you hunted and you brought back, meat and cooked it yourself. And so like, it really was your responsibility to provide for yourself in your own way up until industrialization. And then it was like, hey, come work for us. You don't have to worry about anything else. We'll just hand you a paycheck.
I think I would have made armor. That's what I would
exactly.
You
live in a village. You live in a village and it's like, well, what do I do to help out other people? I'll apprentice under somebody until I know how to do it myself. And then I'm in charge of blacksmithing or whatever, or making wine, whatever.
And I follow a ton of Instagram accounts of knife makers. I'm just fascinated with like the metal forging and the making of knives. Like it's great to see that, because it says to some kid like, hey, you want to forge metal for a living? You can build a business.
Yeah. That's cool. Before we hit record, you were mentioning something about Dustin Wynn, something he posted.
Yeah. So this is kind of like backing up everything I've been saying. So I don't know exactly what happened with Dustin, but something happened with Marvel. My guess is they were trying to hire him for a job.
Just explain who he is really quick.
So Dustin is a celebrity. He's one of those few creators I was talking about that has reached a rock star status and makes a very healthy living doing freelance.
What is that, by the way? Is that just over six figures? Is it a couple double six figures? What is it?
I mean, it's a scale, but I would say like if from my perspective, I could never make more than 60 doing what I was doing. I had no more time in my life to give to making more comics to make more money.
Yeah. And
that, like with 2 kids, like that's a rough way to go. So for me, like now, if you could make over, $100K in a year doing freelance, I think you're doing pretty good. And I think that's pretty rare.
I think the top guys though, they're in the healthy mid 6 figures range.
I'd say 3 to 5 are like the high end guys, the artists. The writer's much more than that.
And then I know a guy who he let me know he made $1 million this year in his online. Just selling stuff through art and all that kind of stuff.
And that's a business. That's a good business minded person too.
Yeah.
But also there are fluke things like, but Dustin, let me get back. I was talking about Dustin. Dustin, like that being said, he's spent the past few years primarily doing creator-owned work with Jeff Lemire on their creator-owned series, Ascender and Descender. So I guess Marvel came at him with something. And it was exciting. He's like, yeah, I want to do that. Then they sent him the contract with the rate, and it sent him on a tirade. He went to Instagram and he was like, just called them out. Like, this is insane what I've been offered. He's like, not because I'm Dustin Wen. For anybody, this is insulting and insane, and it's unfair, and it has to change. And he did this on his Instagram story, and it caught fire, and all of the comic book news sites are reporting on it. And this is what's really awful about the industry. There's this like Stockholm syndrome going on, and the amount of artists that Dustin said that reached out to him like, hey buddy, you should be quiet, like be careful man, this is your future you're messing with, was scary, because that's the mentality. Don't piss off the overlords. And so he doubled down, because I mean, Dustin's at a point where he's safe. Like, he's good. He doesn't
need Marvel.
No, he doesn't need them. So that's, again, so anyone's argument, anyone would ask, but I need a job. I'm like, well, the other side of that is this. So it's hot right now. It's a hot topic. This just happened like 4 or 5 days ago, and the comic news sites are still going on and on about it. And Dustin is still saying like, I'm not, I stand by what I said.
Yeah.
And, he said like, look, my hope is that this changes. Like, Marvel, do better. Like, he said those words, Marvel, do better.
Doing his own, create your own book. Like, so your other option is you can go to Image Comics if you want to do something like that bridges the gap between you launching a Kickstarter and you being in mainstream comics. And so Image Comics is like, they won't take any project. They vet stuff. They want to make sure you know what you're doing. You have to submit to them essentially 3 finished issues before they'll consider you, because they want to know. They've been burned before by creators who are like, yeah, I'll do it, and then they only do 2 issues when they promise 6. So but what I was going to say is, if you do a book with Image, you are in charge of marketing the thing. You're in charge of making sure comic shops know what to order. You're making sure it looks the way you want it to look. You hire the colorist. If you're a writer, you hire the art team. If you're an art team or an artist, you hire, a writer to collaborate with you or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're very much aware of how these books are selling and the kind of profit you can make from it, because Image will take their cut for like administrative fees, and then whatever it costs to print the book, and then everything else goes to the creator. So if your book sells 100,000 copies, cha-ching, like you just pulled in.
The loose math on that is the creative team gets about $1 a book. So if your book does really well, let's say issue 1 sells 50,000 copies. That's a really good launch on a book.
Yeah.
The creative team just made $50,000. As an artist working for Marvel and DC
for 20 pages of art.
Yeah. That's not going to happen at Marvel and DC. Now, but you have to know that numbers drop as the book continues. And then where is it going to level off?
Yeah, because from the consumer side, everybody buys issue 1. They read it. Yeah, I like it. I'll buy issue 2. And so half as many people will buy issue 2. And then half as many people will buy issue 3. And by 3, that's pretty much your audience. That's
your core. Yeah. Now, so that creates a bit of a bottleneck. So by the time you get to issue 3, you're not making the money you would make at DC, say, generally speaking. And I've had this talk with Mateo on Black Science. So by the time he got to issue 3, they were down to like 7,000 or 8,000, which is still really good numbers for an independent comic. But financially, it's not great. But you've made some good money off issue 1. And if you're smart, you've got a little bit of an egg to help you. But once you get to your trade paperbacks, well, that's work you've already done. Then you get a nice big check on the collected book of the first 4, 5, 6 issues. And so if you can just make it to that first collection money, then you're in the cycle where you're making a good living at this. And as long as the book keeps its core audience at that point, you're going to do good.
Right. Because everybody who bought issue 1 is like, well, this is good, but I can't going back to what we were saying, I can't afford to buy 6 issues.
Right.
So I'm just going to trade weight. I'm going to buy that trade paperback when it comes out. So now you've made a sale of issue number 1, and that person's going to buy your trade paperback. And so you could sell 50,000 copies easy
Right.
of a trade paperback, maybe even more, because you've had 6 months of an issue being on store shelves, essentially being a buy me poster.
Exactly. That's it. The way I think the best way to look at doing a floppy at Image is your floppies are marketing. Your money is in the trades. Because once you get to like 4 or 5 trades that are out on the shelves and in the bookstores, you're making really good money just off reprinted material.
Right.
And that's where the bigger money is.
Right. Now, Marvel, they know how many books they can sell. They know the profits on that type of thing. And they, because they're selling so many comics for so many years, understand this is how much a book can make judged on these sales. And for whatever reason, understanding that those things, like the rates are still, a pittance or what it should be.
Yeah.
So it's good that he's calling out, and he's, him and I saw a headline here, Sean Murphy and Zoe Thorogood kind of joined the.
I'm sure Sean loves this stuff. Like this is Sean's MO. I'm glad to see Zoe hopping on. She's an example of a rarefied talent who came in with a vision, did a creator-owned book, did another creator-owned book, and the Image book she did just. I haven't seen a young cartoonist with an understanding of this medium work so well in a long time. She's a powerhouse. So I'm glad to see her because she's a younger voice speaking up about this too.
And then this is a bleeding cool headline article. So Sean Gordon Murphy, Zoe, Chris Stevens.
Chris is great. Yeah, good.
Yannick Paquette. And then Jason Sean Alexander as well.
Good. Jason's another one. Yeah.
So they're all they're all coming out of the woodwork. saying,
Well, because we all say that. Like these are the conversations we have. Like, for example, I got offered a Batman painted cover and a Absolute Martian Manhunter. Absolute Batman painted cover. Absolute Batman is the biggest selling title DC's had in a decade. And Absolute Martian Manhunter. They offered me 2 painted covers. And I haven't worked for Marvel and DC in a long time, primarily because of the money. But I know the resale value on that Batman cover is going to be massive.
Right.
So I took it. And then they gave me my rate. It is embarrassingly low. Like I've had conversations with people like, dude, I can't even believe what they gave me at DC to do that. It's insulting.
So is it because they know that you can sell that cover on your own for a certain amount of money, that like, well, we know the artist is going to be taken care of because they can sell the original art?
I can't say yes to that because they also offered me Absolute Martian Manhunter cover, which I took, and it's one of my favorite pieces of art I've ever made. But that cover is not going to be worth near what the Batman's worth.
True.
So it's the same rate. It's not, so I can't say that's the case just based on my experience.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. Go ahead, Will.
So if I'm a young artist listening to this and comics is my thing, I really want to do my own IP, I want to tell my own stories. Is it better if I try to do everything online? Is it better to go to comic conventions to try to sell my comics, like, or is it a combination of the two, or is there some like what's
all the above?
Okay.
I think anything and everything. Like, just think of it like a business. Do whatever you can. It's all a learning process. Try everything, see what works, then double down in those avenues, and then try to figure out in these other avenues, if it didn't work there, why, and is there anything I can do to help it get there? I'd say, just throw all the spaghetti at the wall and go for it.
Do you know any indie creators that have sold their IP for like, movie options or anything like that? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, any comic book movie that you've seen, let's say Scott Pilgrim. Okay, that's one I think most people know at this point.
Right.
Scott Pilgrim was a creator-owned book for a small publisher. And I mean, the publisher gave teeny little advances to the artist Brian, who wrote and drew the book. Not enough to survive, make a living off of. But that movie goes on to become a cultural phenomenon. A big film gets made of it. And recently an anime for Netflix gets like an animated version of it comes out. And that book exploded. And Brian, luckily the director, Edgar Wright, he's an artist and he's a fan of comics. And when I say he's an artist, I mean a visionary artist. He's a director, but he comes at things from a creative side, not just the business side. So he hired Brian to be the storyboard artist for the film. He wanted the film to be as true to the comic as possible. And so he had him on board for the making of the movie. So in that instance, Brian, I don't know what he made, but it's insane. And another story is a good friend of mine was a co-creator on The Walking Dead, Tony Moore. He drew he created the characters, drew the first 6 issues, created the whole look of the book. And the amount of money he's made off of Walking Dead is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I just know, like, when the show first launched, the trade paperback for the first collection of The Walking Dead, the units it sold and what he was paid was massive. And then he found out he wasn't getting his owed cut. So it was even bigger than that. So, I mean, these are, but those are the rare examples. Like, you can't like say, that's what I want and go for, I mean, you can, but you're probably going to be let down.
It's the same with Ryan Otley too, and Invincible.
Like, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That book just sold so well, so consistently for 200 issues. How many issues did they end up doing? 100 some odd issues.
It was a lot.
Yeah, no creator-owned comic gets to 100 issues easily.
Right. And then you also got to wonder, because the writer of that was the other co-creator of The Walking Dead. Like, did his name and his association with Walking Dead help Invincible? Like, there's a lot of things going on here.
I think, Invincible was just a darn good book. Like,
yeah, no doubt. I don't want to. I'm not taking anything away from that.
I think if someone else had written Invincible and done, the same kind of work on it, I think it would have been just as successful. But
okay. I mean, probably
success does breed success, and I'm not gonna say that doesn't happen.
But but those are and the thing is, like, Tony didn't do The Walking Dead to make millions of dollars. He did it because that was his love, was horror comics, and he wanted to do a horror comic. And like, Ryan loves superhero comics, and that's why he did Invincible. Right. So I think it's good to have it in your mind. Like, what can I do to go for that?
Yeah.
And
I want to point out, so Walking Dead came out when there was no like zombie horror comics, right?
And it didn't sell great when it first came out.
And it didn't sell great when it started coming out, right? So it really was like this passion thing. Like, hey, comics can be anything we want it to be. I want it to be zombies, so let's do zombies.
Yeah.
Invincible, it came out. There's plenty of superhero stuff, but Invincible said, what if we took superheroes and we did it ultra violent, but we also just completely shifted your understanding of like these iconic characters. So like, what if Superman was actually a bad guy, right?
Right.
What if,
and I mean, Spider-Man's basically the lead character of Invincible. He's a teenage boy with powers. Like, it's flipping everything on its head. Yeah.
And then you think about like Bone. So Bone came out in the 90s, but 90s, if you ask somebody, tell me what the 90s were like in comics, you'd be like, oh, it was like, let's get as extreme as possible. And here comes Jeff Smith with, I'm doing a comic strip, essentially cartoon, like really cartoony.
Like Pogo.
Pogo, but in a Lord of the Rings universe.
Yeah. And I remember first seeing Bone, I was like, what is this? Like, it was black and white. The brush lines were just so beautiful. The drawing, but it was like it looked like an old comic strip. It was, I loved it. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying here is, if we look at the landscape today, if you're going to do a breakout hit in comics, most likely it's going to be something that's a little bit different from what the mainstream mainstream is doing, but something that people are wanting and needing and wanting to see in it. So, for example, the best-selling comic for the last 10 years worldwide, not counting manga, we're taking the Japanese market out of this
Yeah,
because
because
that blows everything out of proportion. But
right,
is Dogman by Dave Pilkey.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
And Will, if you've got grandkids now, who probably, are they into Dogman at all, or are you familiar with Dogman in that
I have
regard?
a 10-year-old grandkid, but I don't know what comics he's into.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guarantee you he has
He
read
probably
Dogman.
does.
He has read Dogman. So Dogman is essentially the guy who did Captain Underpants was like, let's take this little side character from Captain Underpants and let's make him like the main character of his own series. And it's goofy and it's silly, but it also is like, it teaches some really core truths. Like, I don't say it's not too moralistic, but it's in a way he's taking like themes that you would get from classic literature and doing like really goofy, silly stuff with it, right? So kids love it. The gatekeepers for kids, parents, librarians, teachers love it because it gets kids reading books and it's a gateway book. And it's like this breakout because it's not what you would expect from like the children's market, which the previous breakout was Smile. Like, I'm going to do
Right.
this slice of life, girl growing up, has to deal with braces and how that affects all of her relationships. And girls were just like, oh my gosh, it's a comic for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's not superheroes.
Raina
And
for my daughter was everything.
yeah, exactly. And so you look at Smile, you look at Dogman, you look at like what Bone did, you look at what Hellboy was. It's all these people who are zagging when everyone else is zigging, but in a way that really aligns with what people are wanting and needing and not getting. And I think that if you're going to, based on everything Shawn's been telling us here, if you want to have success in comics, I think it needs to be true to who you are. It has to be something that you really want to make. You have to be authentic about it. It has to be something a little unique, but also what people want. And I think right now it either needs to be something indie, like that you can do through Image Comics, or something that you could get published through like one of the major publishers, Scholastic, HarperCollins, First Second, like Penguin Random House. And then I also think it's not going to be your first book. It's going to be your third book that really takes off.
I agree. I agree. And also, just to put all that in perspective, we were just talking, all the creators you just mentioned, the sales of their books are dwarfing the superhero books. If I'm at a table at a convention with a bunch of Marvel DC artists and I say Raina Telgemeier, most of the people at the table will be like, who? and that's happened. Like, I'll just say Raina and they're like, who? I'm like, how do you not know this?
Oh, so she sold 800 times as many books as you this year.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, this is good. I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming,
Shawn. Yeah.
That was Shawn Crystal. Again, you can find him at inkpulp.tv, which is his website, but just search Inkpulp online and you'll run into his Instagram account, podcast that he runs with Mateo and Jim, and who are both great comic book artists on their own, Mateo Scalera and Jim Mahfood. So do check them out as well. Any big takeaways you want to talk about with this one, Will?
I love that he is an advocate of artists breaking into comics, starting their own IP. Like, don't wait to get picked. And he obviously he talked about that in the podcast a lot about how to basically work on your own IP and how that can be a back door into working for drawing Batman or working for Marvel or whatever.
Yeah. One of the things we talk about in the course too is if you do want to draw Batman or you want to be like mainstream comics, those editors, those people at those companies are looking for who has vision, who has skill, who has productivity, like who can deliver. And the best way to show that you know how to do all that is drawing your own comics and just, showing up to them and say, hey, I drew my own Batman comic. It's 10 pages long. What do you think of it? And they'll know more about you and your ability as an artist and whether or not you could deliver from your personal, like self induced, what's the word? Self, yeah.
Inflicted.
Self-inflicted. Man, that's not the word, but a project you brought upon yourself and came up with yourself, they're going to learn way more about that than if you just show up with a couple of portfolio
Well,
pieces.
he talked about the glam shots that people do on Instagram and getting hired to do the comic, to draw for Marvel or something, and then that artist basically not being able to have the chops to do the interior work.
Yeah,
because that's all they show on their Instagram, and it looks great, but then they don't know how to do the storytelling part. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, that's it for today. 3 Point Perspective is brought to you by Self-Publishing Pro, or by what are we brought to by? Not Children's Book, not Graphic Novel Pro, by SVSLEARN.com. That's right. Your hosts typically are Will Terry, Lee White. We got Sam Cotterill. We've got Anthony Wheeler. We've got David Hone, myself, Jake Parker. But today it was just me and Will and our guest, Shawn Crystal. I want to just give a shout out to everybody who helps make SVS Learn possible, the courses that we teach possible, and of course, this podcast possible. So shout out to our podcast producer, Daniel Tu, our team manager, Preston Smith, our keeper of the curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, our show notes wrangler, Lily Howell, our chief operations officer, Lisa Fott, and our illustrator, Annalise Black. Now, go draw something. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with the art. I'm Jake Parker.
You're Shawn.
I'm Shawn Crystal. I'm Shawn Crystal. Sorry.
We set you up for failure.
Yep.
This was just
Jake, that was so fast.
I thought Will would just say Lee White's not here, but yeah, okay. So
we set me up for failure.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Nothing like just a raw start to really get your head in the game. So I'm gonna say the same intro. You just say I'm Shawn Crystal,
Okay.
and then actually, you know what?
Dude, that's good stuff. Don't get rid of that. That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
That's what I think. You keep it all.
You just keep it all? This whole thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I would do.
Gee whiz. All right, here we go.
Here's the thing.
I'm not a pro like you guys, though.
The worst is to feel like you're being handled, right? And so when you're a listener and you get a chance to peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, sounds good.
And any fans of the Inkpole podcast, this is how we do. So this is nothing new for them.
I should say, usually what we do anytime we have a guest is we don't even do the intro. We just jump right into the conversation, and then we record an intro, outro afterwards.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll just do that. We'll just do that today, Will.
But Daniel, keep some of this at least.
Yeah. This could be like posts and cut, and then you get to hear
These are the cut scenes after the credits.